On this episode of A State of Control, we take a little bit of a turn and talk about what it's like to manage programmers. How do you get to be in a management role? How do those skills differ from a programmer? And what are some of the challenges and aspects of managing that are required to be successful? All that and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A State of Control.
A State of Control, episode 89, Make Fate.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Chief, the global leader in commercial AV mounting solutions.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to take a little bit of a departure from the technical side, although I'm sure we'll have some tech talk involved in the conversation. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the career and the business side of programming and what it takes to be a manager of programmers. So with me to discuss that are two guests who have roles in management and work directly with programmers. And as Rich and I both have those experiences as well. And let me first start by saying hi and welcome, Uncle Richie. How are you today, Rich?
I'm doing good. This is actually one I'm excited about. It's, there's a whole lot that goes on beyond the bits and bytes of what we're doing. So these are two dudes that I want to hear their Sermon on the Mount from. And
I think it's also a good indication too that things are progressing. You know, when we're having these conversations, we know things are going in the right direction. So first and foremost, let me welcome back somebody who's been on our show quite a number of times, and we're glad to have him here again. He is Dave Hatz, and he's from Room Ready. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve.
Thanks for being here. And last but not least, a newcomer to our show, but I know he tells me he's a frequent listener, and I believe him. And we got a chance to hang out a bit at the recent Infocom show and really had some great conversations. And I know he'll bring a lot to this program. And he is Mike Krejci, and he's from CTI. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve. Glad to be on here and glad to participate.
Thanks for being here. So, as I mentioned, our podcast often talks a lot about the tech, and we talk about what is a programmer's role and what do they contribute and how do they get better and what skills do they need and what is the future of a programmer look like. And we often don't get a chance to talk about how programmers are managed and those people that play the role in companies where there are programming teams, and a lot of programmers are individuals, but then there's a lot of groups now that are forming, whether they're independent or in-house, in integration firms, at enterprise organizations that are a team of programmers. So we're going to talk about what it's like to manage programmers and what makes that work. And Rich, you and I have both started our careers doing programming ourselves and eventually had to make a choice. We had to decide, are we going to continue to kind of do things independently, or do we want to be part of a team? Do we want to have people that we're overseeing, that we're mentoring and thus managing? And with that, you kind of have a little bit of a trade-off to have to take on a different skill set. So could you talk a little bit about what that's like and also what are some of the differences between honing your skills as a programmer versus honing your skills as somebody who is leading programmers?
Yeah, we were just talking about this right before we recorded, which was a good programmer does not make a good manager. It's a skill set that you individually have doesn't necessarily translate into being able to direct people who have the same skill set. I think that technical skill is something that's obviously important in what we do. And you can make a great living staying in that lane. You can have a great career trajectory path. I think sometimes the concern is that we always have this idea that we have to constantly be taking the next step, right? And even in programming, I really don't care what industry you're in. Here's the West Coast Uncle Richie vibe, right? I'm all about follow your bliss, right? And if being in there and working on it and doing the code and day in and day out and the challenges and the problem solving and everything else, if that's your bliss, there's nothing that says you need to go to the next level, right? Or whatever the next level is expected to be. It's not a linear path. With that said, if a new challenge is being sought out, then people are a whole lot more difficult to figure out than APIs. They're a lot more unpredictable, and so when moving and transitioning, and I'm in a unique position where we're small. We're a boutique firm. By design, and so I have the luxury of still being in the trenches and typing away and having my fingers on the pulse of what's available. But at the same time, I'm older and I'm towards the twilight of my career as opposed to the sunrise of my career. And so I'm having to find ways where, I know, I play within myself. I know my skills, but I know my weaknesses. And with projects and the way the technology is shifting, I know when to bring in others and to work with a team. And because of that, I need to be able to communicate what I have in my head to be able to get others to execute. And I think that from a management standpoint, as a programmer, I think it's a good skill to have, period. To be able to translate what you have going on in a sophisticated thought and being able to relay it and put it down, write it down, have a plan, and then being able to replicate that plan. It's good business sense. And, from a business owner standpoint, I think it's critical because you are going to have attrition. You are going to have people who do take the next step, who are going to go to other firms, who are going to start their own firm. And so it's something that, as a company grows, it is something to make sure of. And the good news is that there's lots of information and education out there about how to work with people. But it's tough. It's tough to admit, right? If you're really, really good at what you do and you're the smartest guy in the room, it's hard to admit that you don't necessarily know something, right? It's getting over that sense of weakness and then embracing and saying, okay, this is brand new for me. And, in the software industry, we talk about fail fast, right? Management's the same way. Learn to fail fast. And embrace it and accept it and work through. So, in a nutshell, it's going to make you a better programmer, whether you think it does or it does or not. Ultimately, it'll make you a better programmer because you will learn how to keep a process going.
Dave, I think Rich laid out a lot of things that I'm going to try to tag onto, but we could first start with the people side versus the API, which I thought was a really interesting thing. And from your standpoint, I know that you keep up your technical chops and attend training and still pursue what you need to have your head in there. But what are some of the things that you've learned or have been challenging when it comes to managing programmers from a people perspective?
There's a lot there. And you hit on it that, the journey I took transitioning from doing the programming to leading the teams that are doing the programming was a very conscious choice I made. And it's because I did want to take that knowledge that I had gained and do more with it. I realized that I could be doing the biggest and baddest projects. And I felt that sense of accomplishment and I really enjoy it. But at the same time, I made the choice that I wanted to take a different career trajectory to be able to bring others along and coach and mentor that out of others. But that was a choice I made. And I think it's important, I think Rich, you hit on it, a really important piece there that jump is not for everyone. Because, if you look at the personality traits typically of what make a good programmer. And I say typically because we see all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of personalities succeed as a really good developer. But when you look at it, it's that engineering mindset, that technical background, the attention to detail, the patience to get, to stick with things, persistence, stubbornness, frankly. Because when you're sitting in the back of a rack on Friday night at 8:30 and all you want to do is go get dinner and go home because it's been a long week, what makes a successful programmer is someone who's going to stick with it and do one more round of testing because in their head they really know that's what needs to happen. So those traits, many of them can be very valuable in a transition to leadership of a team. But transitioning to a leader, you also introduce the traits to interact with the people, to managing personalities, compassion, empathy become really valuable in my experience. And if you think about it, is compassion necessarily a necessary requirement to be a really successful developer? I wouldn't be on my top list. You can obviously make an argument for anything that there's value somewhere in it, but it's not top of my list. Is empathy, is the big picture thinking, frankly. There's a lot of areas in dealing with people that make you really successful or challenge you, and that's really, it is a fork in the road from the path that a really good software developer likely has been on. So I think that it's important to call that out. At the same time, I don't mean to de-emphasize the value that the experience a programmer has, brings to perspective, to being able to make good decisions. And, with that empathy comes accountability still. So, if I'm leading my team, it's not just here's a pile, go get it done. It's I need to be prepared to use my experience to know what they're going through to help block for them, to help ensure that I've set the boundaries of what's expected, but that I'm clearing the path for them to be successful. And so that background as a programmer really helps me see where I expect they may have challenges, or when they come to me and say, I can't figure this out. Well, is it a challenge that's technical they can't figure out? Is it a challenge with the construction situation or the dynamics of the job? Is it a people problem they're experiencing? Whatever it is, to be an effective leader, you need to be able to help clear the path, help them drive clarity to the individual so they can perform optimally. So, the long or the short of it all is it's so intertwined, but it's like you just take another skill set and put it on top of what you've already developed. And then you start honing that, just like you honed becoming a good developer. It takes work, it takes practice, it takes coaching and mentoring and studying. There's so much you can do I would say you need to do to learn how to manage, just like you learned how to program.
Mike, I think Dave touched on a lot of important things there, and I'll bring you in, to share some of your experience. You come from a similar background as the rest of us, and I know that you are somebody who gets their hands involved in a project when need be, but also has the responsibility of overseeing quite a number of people doing a lot of different things. Is it important that how important is that experience that you have in being able to step in when you need to versus, is it more important that you are just a good, strong manager, as Dave's talking about from the personality side, from the soft skills, and then the other aspect is talking about, how do you actually get things done from an efficiency standpoint?
Yeah, I think it is important to have that technical ability, that the chops to be able to communicate, right? Because we, as managers, are sitting with the rest of the leadership of the organization. We're not just a programming house. We're doing integrations. We're talking to customers. So we're having those conversations with the salespeople, with the engineers, with the head of the salespeople, with the head of the engineers, with the clients. So we need to be able to talk about what something can do, what we can program, and having those the knowledge of what a programmer can do or what we can't do to go, yes, we can do that. May take $1 million, but we can do it. To know that is definitely valuable, and also to be able to know what your team can do and what they can't do. Oh, this is a project that'd be great for this person. Oh, this is over that person's head. I don't think they're the right person. Make sure that they're aligned, and having that skill set to know what can be done, what can't be done, where limitations are is very valuable.
Rich, I'll let you kind of jump back in. One of the things that you touched on too is about kind of being responsible for the next generation and passing on those skills. What does that look like? Is that a manager's job, or is that more of a senior programmer's job?
I think tribal knowledge should be passed on at all times. I think experience absolutely should be passed on. Again, it's being a team leader means teaching people how to be good team members. Regardless of whether you've participated in team sports or not. There's lots of examples out there about how teamwork creates an environment. We use the term esprit de corps, right? Or in the ranks, or in the rank and file, or it's not the Centurion way of doing things, right? Ours is not the reason why, right? Business is different now. Business is a lot different now than when we started. And in the beginning, 25, 30 years ago, right? You'd come in, you'd get the grizzled old guy who was kind of burnt out. And sure enough, these were guys that were still, smoking a pack a day on a paint can, on a job site, and that's just how it was. It's different now. And I think for the good, it's a bigger thing that's going on now, just society as a whole. And I think that Dave really hit it. Empathy is something finally that is becoming a part of the natural workday. In the old days, if I had a problem with, I had to go pick up my kids, or if there was something going on at home, or a parent that I was caring for, right? It was always about the job, get a job, right? Your personal health, your mental health was not necessarily part of the equation. I think what we're learning as managers now is the importance of empathy. That when you give an environment for people to thrive, and then you help others create an environment to thrive, they get better. They want to do more. They want to reach out more. But it's kind of weird. Because like I said, Dave said it. He said it's a lot to unpack. We're talking about massive shifts in how we work. Again, look at just the past year and a half, right? We all individually have spent decades trying to explain to people that our business works better if we're not there. And in the past year and a half, they're starting to get it. They're starting to go, oh, you don't need to show up here and do all of these things. You can actually just do it from your office. And so it's great because there is this opportunity, truly an opportunity, for companies to grow and companies to bring in. And we're in our industry, we're facing a labor shortage. We're not getting the young guys in. And so as a manager, you've got to do the best with the ones that you are getting, because we are losing them to the tech industry. The ones you're going to get are passionate about what they do. They're coming in because they really dig this stuff. I'm sitting in Silicon Valley. And so, a junior programmer coming out of a decent computer engineering or computer science school, there's a lot of opportunities available to them. And that's who we're competing with. So we really have to work with providing this next generation coming through, right? That reach one, teach one. Because in our industry, we didn't have a software industry to compete with. It wasn't there. So we were a destination. We are not necessarily a destination for most computer science graduates. It just, that's just math. So as a programmer, and if you're going to take the next step, it's super important, because otherwise all you're going to wind up doing is losing staff and being programming the whole time. So, it's interesting. Like I said, I am always interested to hear what Mike and Dave are doing, because that's their day to day right now, right? Getting people in, retaining people, getting the people that they have better at what they do in order to grow. Because the way that their organizations are built, they got more work than bodies. So efficiency is a super important concept right now.
Well, and something, too, that goes to that point of that developing talent. When you advance into the ranks of leading programmers, there's really two halves to it, if you think about it. There's management, which is getting the work done, getting the projects through. And then there's leadership, which I look at, that's the place where I see the programmer has a real advantage as they transition into a supervisory role. Because to all the points, Rich, you just made about making the most of the team you have, in that leadership, that's the point where I find really beneficial that I know the journey, I know what it takes, and so when I have one of our assembly technicians come to me and say, maybe it's we're out on a job site and we're having dinner and a couple beverages, and we're sitting talking about okay, what do you see 5 years from now? Well, I'd really like to do such and such. Okay, it's an opportunity for me to start to provide guidance of, okay, if you want to get there, have you ever thought of what the first step is? How about if either you could take this as a first step, or more importantly, what step could I lay out for you as a first step to get you where you want to be down the road somewhere? And I think that's really important in that development of talent, that fostering, because if I look at, one of our field techs, let's say, they come in and they look and say, oh, this is all really good. And I can spot that they get it. They really understand, and they're thinking about how these things work, or want to understand how these things work. Okay, if I can spot that 5 years from now, that has me, my next rock solid developer or rock solid engineer, or whatever role fits them. I didn't have to go and screen and hire for that person, and all the risk that comes with the turnover of individuals. And Rich, to your point, I've started with someone who's passionate. I've started with someone who's there because they want to be there, not because it's a paycheck. And that is intangible. I've always said, I can teach the skills to many people. You can't teach desire. You can't teach passion. You can't teach common sense and the ability to think on your feet. Those things that we know make a good programmer. You can't teach that. And so by being out there and working with those in your organization to help mentor them, not just manage them, but mentor them. And I would say, whether it's in my group, another group, or frankly, there's times where, we give such good opportunities to an individual that their next step means they do leave our organization. I'm still happy for them, because the journey the opportunities, that, we were able to provide for them it set them up to make a better life for themselves. And that's an important part, in my belief, to keep in mind. It's not just about managing to get jobs done as a leader. That's an important part of it, but it's the leadership too that comes hand in hand if we're talking about a successful manager.
Mike, I'll let you take the next, carry the conversation further. Where do we go, to learn these skills? Because, we have, at least we know in the industry where to go when we're trying to learn something technical, but where do we go to learn some of the leadership skills that Dave's talking about? And is it something that is innate, that you use your instinct, or do you find a mentor? Do you find, or do you look for some type of education? What's been your experience?
I think some of it is innate. I think it comes to you with your passion for this industry, for the passion of programming. Some of that leadership is just part of that, right? We express our passion, our love for what we do. You can tell by talking to Dave, to Rich, to you, Steve, that we really enjoy what we're doing, and that's part of the reason we're on these podcasts, is because we love what we're doing, and we can then share that with others. That's part of the leadership part, and the other part is reading. Outside of work, once you're done with your 50 hour week and getting the work done, then it's you're flying on a plane, you're sitting at a beach, grab a leadership book, and read it, figure out how can I be better, my skills, right? Yes, we need to learn, the programming languages, the technology, but I think for us leaders, it's trying to build those skills in more of a traditional way, outside of the industry, and trying to grab those leadership skills from, books, podcasts, outside of programming.
Dave, I'll let you chime in if you want to add some more there. Or, one of the things I keyed in on that you said is you made a very conscious choice to go the direction that you're going in. What triggered in you to do that, aside from, feeling that you want to help other people, as you mentioned?
So the one I would say, just back to the previous question there for 1 second, I would say, the books and the podcast, I got to double click on that, Mike, because that's exactly, that's the easiest one, honestly. And I've become, so I think, you can Google leadership books and you can find the rated ones. My advice is read a handful of them. You will learn that not every bit of every book matters to you. Not every book agrees, and you got to find what's right for you. But it's absolutely important there. The other one I really, from a continuous standpoint, is find a couple good podcasts. One that I personally really enjoy is Modern CTO. And it's not just for CTOs, but it bridges technology from, it's all areas of the IT stack and beyond. So they might be talking to a leader in a Bitcoin organization. They might be talking to a leader in a Fortune 500 the next week. So it spans the whole breadth, but they geek out on what that individual does from a technical standpoint, but then they also weave in nuggets around both managing and leading. So just call out really good, recommendation there. So Steve, what was the second part of your question there? I wanted to get that one out, so apologies there.
How did it come to you to say this is the, because it's a tough decision, and I think that we've tackled it from a couple of different angles.
Well, so I think the first part of that is it didn't come to me initially. It was, I was given an opportunity of, here, we have a challenge. The leaders in our organization would come to me and say, hey, I have a challenge. Do you think you could figure it out? Special project, if you will. Okay. Well, as I start to dive into it, then I need to pull some others in. And then I pull some others in. And before long, I'm leading a team. And then it's sort of, and you do that a few times. And then it starts to hit to you that, hey, this is where I sort of did realize at one point that, hey, I'm actually impacting and, really accountable for the output of this team. And I like that. That's the part where, I like being able to make sure that we as a team cross the finish line together. I don't have that need to be the one in the front, personally. That's just me personally. I don't need the glory and the accolades. I would much rather it go to my team. And so seeing and just sort of feeling that same rush that comes from the team being successful, as it was when I would go in and spend the late nights on a job site, doing the work myself, sacrificing anything and everything to just get it done. And with a family, I could minimize or reduce the travel some. It all sort of played together of, hey, this is a path I'd like to go on when an opportunity comes up. And so then it was a matter of, both having the opportunities come to me, but also looking for the opportunities. Because, I'm a big believer that, yes, fate happens, but you also make fate. And so, I had some opportunities that I was able to also, throw out ideas to my leadership of, hey, what about this? And, I would have interest in leading this group or just sharing with leadership that I had interest in leading. Because that's really important. If those who are empowered to solve the problems of an organization don't know what their team would prefer to do or would like to do or the trajectory they'd like to go on, they can't help you. And so I think, for me, it was also, having leaders who, who were true mentors to help develop my skills, knowing that that's the path I wanted to go on, and helping me find opportunities. I think those, sort of bring those three things together. And that's really what, if you will, the light bulb going on for me was of here's the opportunity, to make something of it.
Appreciate that. Mike, do you have a similar story, or can you share what got you to where you're at? Because I think it'd be very helpful for those listening to understand. And I'm going to wrap up with Rich to kind of put a bow on it in the same fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now our company is fairly large, and but when I started, we weren't. So there wasn't really a need for, programming leadership 12 years ago when I started with the organization. There weren't that many programmers. They didn't need a leader, right? There was a leader, but he led everybody. So as the company grew, there was a hole. And I noticed it. Some other people noticed it, and kind of like Martin Luther, I tacked a note to the door saying, here's our problems. Here's where we are. This is where our gaps are. We don't have the best leadership. We're missing some standards. We're missing some processes. We need to be better as an organization. And it was. At that point, it kind of tapped me, and they went, okay, fix it. To which I started fixing it still as a programmer. And then they went, okay, you've shown that you can fix it. You can make it better. Here's a position for you. So I started leading as a programmer, not as a manager. But it was leading that team. Here's how we can be better. Here's some we need standards in these file names, in where we put things, how we program, so that if I'm looking at it, or a programmer in California is looking at it, or a guy in Chicago, we all can look at the same code and go, okay, I know what they're doing. They did it right. They'll have to. So that's how it kind of got there. It wasn't by design that I got into leadership, but it wasn't something I was against.
Absolutely. Rich, I think we're probably going to be continuing this conversation, but I just wanted to see if you want to provide a little bit of advice as to somebody who wants to go down this path.
Yeah, and actually surprisingly, I'm going to make this brief. Honestly, the first bit of advice that I have is, first off, if you're tuning into this podcast, there's 3 individuals, not myself, but there's 3 individuals who are responsible for day-to-day management of programming teams. So reach out. I have to say that now where I'm at in my career, I was lucky. I had people who sought me out to mentor me, right? They took that first step because I didn't know how to take the first step. And so somebody was able to spot and say, hey, they're motivated, they're young, they got to pull their head out of their butt, but there's something there. I know for me, as this has gone on and we've been doing the podcast and stuff, occasionally somebody will reach out. That's what we're looking for. And I can absolutely say, I'm going to speak for Mike and Dave in this case. They're going to welcome that. You're not going to be a bother. We showed up on this podcast because if you don't know what you don't know, it's okay to send an email or a text or however, you want to get this information out. It's okay to take that first step because we did. and somebody jumped in for us. So, best advice I can give right now, write down these guys' contact information, Steve's or myself. Make that first step, because if we don't know, we can point you to somebody who does and can give you a quick overview of, hey, here's some things to consider. I know for me, my mentors have gone on, given me a little task. I've come back and showed that, 1, I was motivated, 2, I was going to follow through, and 3, it wasn't just a flight of fancy. And so once I did that, then they took an interest in me because they saw that I took an interest in it. And once you do that, things will build. It's neat seeing now, 5, 6, 7 years later, people that we've met through like AV Tweeps or through some of the podcasts or something who've approached us in the past, and I've seen their career trajectory going. And so that meant, wow, they took their own advice, they sought things out, and they bettered themselves, and we're now seeing the development of it. So, reach one, teach one really does mean something, but you got to reach first if we're going to teach. And so that's honestly the best advice, is get over that fear. Because, like I said, programmers are a weird group, man. It's showing that sign of weakness, all of a sudden the geeks, try to thin the herd if they smell weakness in the ranks, right? It doesn't work that way with what we're doing. We're genuinely committed to helping whoever's tuning in here, do something better. Just even if it's that little stuff, or be a sounding board. I can't tell you that sometimes, we use rubber duck programming, right? Management's rubber ducking as well. It's sometimes just being able to say it out loud to go, oh, that's what I meant. So, rubber duck it.
And with that said, I think that we are going to continue this conversation, and if everybody's up for it, we'll likely do a follow-up episode. And but before we do, I do want to give you guys a chance to reach out to everybody. So I'd like to thank both Mike and Dave for being part of today's episode. Dave, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about Room Ready, and tap into some of your knowledge?
Absolutely. And so I want to, again, Rich, I want to, double click on what you said, is that, I'm absolutely willing and ready to hear and to talk with anyone who wants to talk, more in depth on this topic. Just, I'm happy to share my journey, advice I might give. So best way to contact me is LinkedIn. Just find me, Dave Hatz. And like I say, happy to keep a conversation going. Find out about Room Ready. We're on the webs at roomready.com.
Excellent. Mike, hopefully this has been a good experience for you, and you'll be coming back soon. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about CTI?
Yep, and I want to touch, just like Dave did, on please do reach out to us. I told Steve before the episode started, we're about a different topic. We're here to make friends in this industry and not enemies, right? Programmers, let's be collaborative with each other. Your betterment is better for me too. So, but you can reach out to me on Twitter or the LinkedIn at the Mike Krejci, and CTI. Go to cti.com. That's where you can find us there.
And just so everybody knows, spelling Krejci, so that you can easily reach out to Mike. And Rich, one of the things that I was going to talk about is a lot of the mistakes that we've been able to learn from, but we'll leave that for another episode. But how can people get in touch with you and learn more what you're up to and get your insight and advice?
Well, yeah, obviously social media platforms, there's tons of professional groups on Facebook. You can find me there, Richard Fregosa. You can find me on Twitter at rfregosa. You can find us on the website, Fregosa Design. My email's rich@fregosadesign.com. But I will always say, first and foremost, the best place I hope you can find me would be here at AVNation.tv in our suite of shows here with my partner. Actually, we pulled double duty this week, so it was kind of a good one. We were on Resi Week earlier in the week, and now with our own, we took a hostile takeover of the show halfway through. But obviously here, AVNation TV, State of Control, reach out to us. We're constantly looking for your feedback, so don't be afraid to reach out. I mean, it's definitely, we make these shows because we want to make them relevant. And so the best way for us to be relevant is for you to tell us what you think is relevant.
And I couldn't have said that any better myself, so we'll leave that there. But yeah, if you could, just let us know what you want to hear more about, and leave us a rating, a review, share an episode. That would mean the world to us. And for me, you could reach me at Steve Greenblatt on most social platforms. Twitter and LinkedIn are the ones that I'm most active. My company, Control Concepts, is at controlconcepts.net. And I do a little bit of blogging and other stuff there as well. So if you have some questions or want to reach out, I'm always glad to talk to people. And that's why we do this podcast. So with that said, that's all we have for today. And this has been A State of Control.